Okay, so we are joined in conversation today by Andrew Foster. Andrew is the Vice President of Global Sales Consulting at Appzen. I've recruited directly for Andy in the past and can say that he really is a top-notch hiring manager, and with a very kind of attuned eye for talent. So, Andrew, thanks for taking the time.
That's very kind words, John. Appreciate it.
Very genuinely said as well. Genuinely said. Cool. Okay, so the first question we're asking everybody is, why do you work in pre-sales, and what do you love about pre-sales as a role?
I think probably like most people, I kind of fell into it. And what I certainly enjoy coming through the ranks of pre-sales is just that ability to pick up something new. The ability to learn, and really the ability to go and sort of coach companies how to do something in a different way, in a very consultative manner. I also kind of feel that the role allows itself to interact with different sort of divisions within an organization. So that's product marketing, sales, R&D. You don't just have to work in a silo. You can go across multiple departments. So certainly for me, and in my journey within pre-sales, they've been some of the sort of key reasons.
Super, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. And in terms of hiring, I know you've been in a leadership position from 2013. So could you please tell us what role does hiring play for you in building your team, in having a great pre-sales team?
I think it's just absolutely fundamental to building the right kind of structure. Everybody always says it, but every business is run on people. Therefore you have to invest heavily in those people. You have to invest heavily, in my opinion, in how you recruit those people. And I also think sometimes you have to be able to make a slight leap of faith, right? So, in many occasions I've had SEs come into my team that, wouldn't really on the surface of it, if you look at their career, actually fit that mold. But actually when you go underneath and look at their skill sets, you find that actually they've got the right kind of skill sets for the right kind of role that you're looking to hire. So for me, it's it is the people, and then it's hiring the right kind of people to fit within a team.
When you say on the surface they wouldn't fit the mold, is that because of their past experience, or is it more that they might not have the exuberance that you expect within sales or something like that, but they have there's other aspects to their abilities that actually enable them to perform really well? So could you give us an idea to what kind of things?
Yeah, sure. I've hired people with SDR backgrounds before. I've hired people from implementation. I've hired people from account management. I've hired expertise in a particular field. So if you look at finance, for example, where Appzen's working, actually hiring people within a finance background and bringing them in, as long as they have the kind of traits that we're looking for, which, in my mind is like things like intellectual horsepower, really strong communication, trustworthy, authentic. If you feel that you're looking for like an SE that can talk to business outcomes, I think not necessarily always looking for an SE with a bunch of technical skills is the way to go. There are some sort of SE roles that absolutely require technical capabilities. You can kind of break the SE role into kind of different functions, if you will. But primarily for me, when I'm hiring for business SEs, it's really about the outcome and what we're going to drive to. And I think that doesn't then always kind of, in my opinion, link you to someone has to have kind of like perfect career. They've come from an SE role, they've worked in that role for 4 or 5 years. I think as long as you look for the right traits, you can build the bridge.
Brilliant. And it's so true. And especially if we look over, the last year in general as well, it's been so, the market is so competitive. And I think hiring managers, it always will feel comforting to interview somebody that has an SE background. But the pool is just so much bigger when you look at people from industry or from consulting roles and so on. But that leap of faith, sometimes I think hiring managers find difficult. So, and just to, I mean, to extend your answer before, but if you were to have a conversation with a new manager and they were saying, look, I want to hire more out of industry or out of consulting positions, what practical advice would you give around, like, do you have a set framework in terms of competence you're looking for, or techniques?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, John, and it's one that over the years I've tried to spend a little bit of time refining, and I'd like to say it was my idea, but it wasn't. But I like stealing ideas from smarter people than mine, and I had the good fortune of working with a lady called Tara Francois at Concur. She's now over at Smartsheet, and she really put this really good program together from a book called FYI, which is For Your Improvement. And what we did as an exercise there is and this is like the SC group, is to pull out a bunch of traits and behaviors that we all felt as an SC org that we felt that SC should have. And so from that, I think we whittled it down. And this book is like this thick, right? It is not a small book. And we whittled it down to about 32 key components or traits.
Excellent.
And I always interview now from that. And I think if a hiring manager, you can go back to some type of framework where you look at it, try to look at it objectively, and look, like, I've also made my fair share of hires through the years that sometimes haven't worked out, and many, and when it has happened, sometimes that's either on my organization or hire we've hired, not always the individual. So I think having that like framework where you can look back at it and really interview towards, I think just really helps, number one, the candidate make sure that as they're coming in, it's the right place to be. But also you have a fair benchmark. And, I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on gut feel when they interview SEs. And I just think, that can work. But from my perspective, I think sometimes you have to look beyond, your gut feel and you need some type of framework. So I guess in summary, my recommendation would be know what you're looking for and have a framework so you can standardize how you look for it.
So good.
It makes perfect sense, and you are one of the first hiring managers that tell us that the gut feeling is maybe not so accurate. And thank you so much. And if you are thinking about the pre-sale cycle and all different components like discovery sessions, demos, partnering with C-level executives, can you think about the most important component?
So you're talking about what internally and that sort of whole sales process. So I think, if you look, in my opinion, like the best industry standard SC teams, they just have that trustworthiness in the business. So they have the ability to go to, and this is like an SC could go to a VP of sales and say, hey, there's something not quite right here, right? We need to revisit it. And there is that type of, I think, respect in the organization and trustworthiness that, if your team or you're doing this as an individual are saying this, that it's done with the right intentions and with the right sort of thought process behind it. So for me, that's really super important. And then that really comes down to really strong communication with teams that, sit throughout that sales cycle. I mean, you'll probably hear lots of people say, you don't win a deal on your own. It's never just the SC or the AE. And it's 100% true, right? Like, it really does take a sort of family approach, a team approach to land opportunities, especially when they're big, and sales cycles can take sometimes 9 to 12 months, right? Like, you have to have that baton effect. So for me, good, strong communication, regular touch points, but also have the ability and the strength to, say something if it doesn't look right, and have the confidence to do so.
So you're not encouraging avoiding conflict. Sometimes conflict is beneficial.
I think constructive conflict is good, right? I think if I look at my team here at AppZen, I will guarantee you we don't all agree with each other. That doesn't mean we're here arguing with each other, but what it means is we have that framework where we can have a junior member of staff say, actually, have you thought about this? Or, have you thought about, what may happen? And really just having that framework, as I said, to have that sort of debate is a healthy one, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that not just for the SC organization, I would say that for any organization or company or department.
Or an individual.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They say nothing shines without friction, or something like that is the expression. Okay, cool. I really want to go back to these 32 traits, because obviously we can't just let that go by, and to see what are the most important for you. Before we do that, and linked to what you were saying before around this kind of ability to be diplomatic or push back. So from the results of the survey so far, of the different components of the role, partnering with AEs is second out of a lot, and it's obviously really important for hiring managers. And something that we've seen as recruiters is, you can ask somebody a question in an interview around how they manage conflict with an AE or with different parts of the business, but doing it in reality is completely different because there are emotions involved. So do you agree with that? And do you have any, how do you go about understanding how well somebody can find that balance of being diplomatic and pushing back where it's needed?
I think it's a really, so for number one, it's a really good question, and I think it is quite a hard thing to interview for or look for. But with me, if I look at the kind of traits, just that ability to be humble. Right. If I'm interviewing somebody and they're constantly saying things like, I did this, I won this. I kind of look at it and go, the likelihoods are it probably wasn't all you as an individual, right? Like there is a team that is behind any kind of sales motion, any big project. So I always look for people that are kind of like humble, like super smart, but they don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. Yeah. They're willing to sort of just, I guess, listen, right, and take information in just before they go and like judge straight away. So for me, like I am always asking those questions, tell me a time when you had a big piece of conflict. How did you resolve it? How do you react? And of course, that takes a little bit of time. You have to triangulate that. It's very hard to do in just one meeting. But I think sometimes you do get that sense of an individual. And for me, that's like a really important trait because, I think in sales, sometimes we have super strong egos. Sometimes we have slightly more passive. And at the end of the day, it's really trying to kind of take emotions out of those conversations. And it comes back to that trust perspective that I mentioned earlier, is that if you are trustworthy and when you give your opinion, it is being delivered like really from the heart with the right type of intentions. Yeah. And it's not done for an ulterior motive other than how do we just make this deal go faster? I would say most sales individuals respond very, very well to that because they are, results driven. They are judged on that and they are paid on that. And when I look back, and I've had various different types of team members, they always go, AEs always navigate to the people that are most trustworthy and give them the honest feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amazing. So that kind of authenticity, and it sounds like you're talking about this kind of, my old boss used to say, we're looking for people with the right compromise of confidence and humility found together. So great stuff. And so of the 32 traits, that's a lot. Okay. And obviously there'll be some that are really important. There'll be some that are less important. What would you kind of stack? I know you've mentioned a few things already, but what would you stack rank as the most important 3 or 4? And then how, as a hiring team, do you go about dividing that work up in terms of assessing them?
Yeah, sure. So I would look at it and go, you have things that we just talked about, like humility, like intellectual curiosity is extremely high for me. Yeah. Because there's always something new, right? And there's always something where you go, Bob said in R&D, we can't do it. And maybe Bob is correct, right? But instead of just taking Bob for his word, maybe I'm going to ask 4 or 5 other people just to make sure. And maybe I'm not just going to look for the technical response. I'm going to look for the business response, or how somebody may be able to kind of work a process outside of the system, or whatever it may be. So intellectual curiosity has to be super, super high, because I think without that, I think you're going to struggle in this role. I think you then just become somebody that is okay at presenting, but when you're presented with something that's more complicated, then it's quite difficult. I think those communication skills, as I've mentioned, is super high as well. If you're not able to communicate to your internal stakeholders as well as your external customers and prospects, you're going to really struggle. So I think they are really, really key. That level of confidence that you mentioned as well. Things like business acumen is super important. Again, if you're going to go and talk to a CFO or somebody in shared service centers or whatever your field of expertise is, you need to know what's going on in business. You need to be able to stand up to, C-suite executives that may come and call your product not what they need, right? Or they might challenge it. And you have to have the confidence, and not the arrogance, but the confidence, the humility to kind of say, well, I actually, through that particular lens, you may be correct, but this is how other organizations like you are doing it, and make sure that you're okay with challenging, right? And there's a bunch of other ones, but I would say that they are really the key ones. Then to your other question, John, now that's a little bit harder, right? How do I then distill that down to other people that interview? I typically ask my team one of those things. So I'll say to maybe one person, hey, look, run your interview how you need to, like how you would run it, but I need this one thing from you.
Yeah, that's great.
Right. Especially like at Abzim, like we are a small company, there's about 300 of us. It's not like I can get everybody in a room and, we go through lots and lots of training on this. Like where we are in our journey is, we're growing rapidly. We want to be quick. But I just need to be able to direct the people in my interview sort of flow, like ask them one or two questions. And that's really where the triangulation comes from.
Yeah.
And if you could go back and talk to yourself when you first started to hire, do you have any advice for yourself?
I think it probably goes back to what I said to John earlier, right? Which is, what's the advice you'd have for anybody hiring? Get a framework, right? Know what you're hiring for. Again, be open and honest when you're interviewing people, right? Every organization has strengths. They have a few little weaknesses, and be willing to share that with people so that when they come in, they know exactly what they're signing up for. So for me, in a nutshell, it would be have that framework, and then that way you have something to work from. So you're not sort of second guessing your questions as you start to ask somebody questions about a role that you're hiring for.
Thank you. And if you're thinking about all the abilities like hard skills, soft skills, cultural fit, and you could imagine a pie chart, what percentage of that pie chart does each of these components occupy?
Oh, that's also a really good question. At the end of the day, the hard skills are the hard skills. Like there's something that if you need a hard skill in your organization, right? So if you're looking for, I don't know, a solutions architect that can talk about integration to an Oracle or whatever it may be, then of course that's got to be higher on that list. And it is a hard skill, and it's something that can be very easily measured. I think if you're looking for like a business consultant, again, it's then looking for, do they have those communication skills, more softer skills to kind of communicate the value? So I'm probably going to sit on the fence for that one and say, I think it will depend on the role, but making sure that you've got somebody that has the right culture. Oh, the lights are going off in our office. We need to pay our bills. Making sure that, you've got the right kind of like culture, the right kind of interpersonal skills is super important, I think, for whatever role.
Amazing. And each hiring manager, pre-sales is so like multifaceted. Different hiring managers look at things differently in terms of what's important for them. And you've underlined intellectual horsepower and business acumen as things. And I think that those are two things that are especially important for you. Why do you think they're especially important? And again, how do you go about trying to assess those two aspects of an individual?
So I think if I was to take intellectual horsepower, like for me, that is understanding, okay, what have you done, right? Yeah. What have you done in the past? And that can range, right? It doesn't need to necessarily be that you went to a university and you got these certificates and degrees. That is an indication, but it also could be that you took a different route and you've learned through a different style. Yeah. And then I also think one of the questions I like to ask people is, how do you tackle a new problem?
Yeah.
You tackle a new challenge. How do you go about it? And look, like it's a fairly hard question, because I think if I asked myself that, I'd probably just say, well, I work really hard at it. But there is a little bit more to it. It's like, how do you approach it? How do you use your network? What kind of materials would you look to use? Do you look to copy the best individual that's in that business and shortcut it? So I think that's like a really key thing to kind of dig into the detail of it. What I tend to do as well is I always ask people to kind of demo something. Mm-hmm. In the past, sometimes that's been our own solution. So we've given access, and we've given a bunch of information to that particular candidate. So I'm not trying to trip them up. It's actually the opposite. I'm like, here's all this information, go and have a look at it. And I think, John, you've worked with me before when we've done this, and then a couple of things happen, right? You have candidates that may not be fully invested in joining your organization, and that's fine as well, right? And they turn up, and you can tell they haven't practiced, right? And to me, that's probably good for them and us, because they're probably not the right kind of fit. Or we're not the right fit for them. If they come in and they're super well organized and they've done the reading and they've practiced it, that comes across, and that then shows to me that somebody has that intellectual curiosity, they're really hungry, and they can then articulate to the business outcomes that we've asked them to present to.
Yeah. Amazing. And it's interesting, this actually ties up with something we were talking about before, is so according to the research, for like knowledge worker positions, in fact, two things actually: cognitive abilities and the personality trait of conscientiousness, which kind of is kind of hard work and accountability and so on and so forth, are the two biggest predictors of success in a position. It's not pre-sales specific. And we were talking about how some things like somebody's ability to communicate is really clear through the interview process. You have a clear idea at the end, but something like, how accountable somebody is, how resilient they are, can they bounce back from when things don't go so well and so on, is difficult to assess. And I think that how somebody prepares, so the level of preparation is an indicator of that as well. So somebody that naturally will always give their all and work hard and so on is always going to prepare well. And if not, like you say, it's a bit of a red flag. And especially by that point of the interview process, because by that point, it should be beyond a kind of a speculative application from their part.
Yeah. And look, trust me, like having sat in a bunch of interviews, I am always on that side of the table, hoping and wishing the candidate does a great job. Yeah. I'm always like, oh, please do a good job. Like I'm probably more nervous for them than they are. Because, I don't want to keep going hiring. It's one of the most difficult things of my job, right? It takes me time. It takes a lot of effort. And, going back to that, maybe they can, maybe sometimes people fail. Occasionally, again, that's fine, right? Even in an interview, you can fail something. Yeah. I think it's like how you recover from that, how you humanize it. And, most people, like all of us, we all make mistakes. So I think people can look beyond it. But you have to have that underlining preparation and communication, and you've had to put your work, your due diligence into it prior to turning up.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I think in terms of like when they show the ability to take constructive criticism on board and work from that and so on. Good. Okay. So we talked about, for example, working with account execs being really important. The other key skill is obviously demos, customer presentations, and so on. And I think that the interview process generally does a good job at picking up someone's ability there. And then the third most important kind of aspect of the position is discovery. And it's less, according to the survey, it's much, so there are less discovery stimulations or something like that. So do you think that discovery is a blind spot in the interview process in general within pre-sales, or do you think that discovery is being assessed in other ways that isn't like a direct scenario?
So I think if you'd have asked me that question like maybe 10 years ago, I'd have been harping on a lot about discovery. You know, we've got to have like an hour and a half meeting. We've got to, you know, document everything, understand all the flows. And I think, you know, for some traditional like software providers that are still out there, I would say that's probably really important to them.
Yeah.
That process. In the space that I'm in with AppZen, you know, we really do truly talk about like best practices, and we know our space extremely well. And whilst we're not arrogant, we can certainly learn a bunch of things. People are also on like a learning journey, and how they buy has changed. So there's already a bunch of information out there about your organization. You already know often what your products do and where they fit. So by the time they engage with you, they've kind of got an idea now of like where they may want to go. And so I think the SE teams like need to change with that, where I'm not saying you should just turn up to a meeting, do a demo and, you know, rock on off. But, you know, you have to be able to kind of, you know, maybe for us, certainly pare down our discovery. So, you know, if we would spend half an hour or 40 minutes on it, that's more than enough. And it's really about industry teaching and best practice. And then also, you know, even like just proving it out. So a lot of companies now want that sort of POC approach. And instead of, you know, sales teams saying this is what we can do, they kind of say, well, actually give me your data now. Let us actually do something with it, and then present it back. So I think I'm seeing, certainly in our business, in our sector, that discovery is less important than it was for me.
Wow.
It's still there, right? Still, I'm not ignoring it, but it's just changed a little bit for us.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. And one last question from my side. Do you have any crazy story that you heard on hiring or you've experienced in the past?
Generally, yes, but you would definitely have to stop recording this. I don't know what else to say to you. I certainly can't say it when you're recording this.
At the end of it, we are going to stop recording, but I'm more curious now. Another question there. So, what is your opinion on personality diversity in your team? So you are looking for some specific abilities. How do you feel about having a team that has different traits, personality traits? Is this beneficial or not so beneficial?
I think it's good to have a team with different hard skills sets. So I think that is really important. So, you know, somebody may be slightly better at sort of infrastructure or integrations. Other people may be better at sort of, I don't know, business outcomes or putting ROI together. So I think, you know, you need that mix. I think the actual general traits that I look for, I think just needs to be you know, with it, again, it's all within reason, right? Like standardize. And again, I think it is totally fine, and I encourage different views. So, you know, we definitely are quite open in terms of the different sort of personalities that you have in. But again, I think a lot of SCs are quite, so we're all similar. but you have this idea of an accountant, don't you? Or you have this idea of an SC or an AE, and sometimes they have those people just have those common traits, and 100% you'll always have the people that aren't. Like, I've worked with some awesome AEs that certainly don't sort of fit the normal AE mold, and that's totally fine as well. So but for me, it's like the hard skills, and then we just overlay it with their personalities and those traits that we talked about.
So last question from my side, before we wrap up. So from the survey so far, 69% of managers are not satisfied with the hiring manager training that they've received, and then 35% haven't received any at all. So do you think that there is a gap there? How have you felt personally in terms of the support you've had in general around, interviewing and being a hiring manager? What are your thoughts there?
So I think when I first got into management, I had a very, very good mentor. And that mentor helped me immensely. And that's Tara. I mentioned her earlier. And from that, and it wasn't a formal training program, right? But I was able to really distill what she had learned over a number of years. And I was able to kind of learn that much, much quicker. And again, we were the size of organization that just really didn't have a training program for hiring managers, right? There wasn't kind of like a process, and there certainly wasn't any official framework, shall we say, for pre-sales. And then as I've kind of worked in like larger organizations, what I've tended to find is like more generic, I'm sorry, the recording there. Okay. More like generic style, like interview sort of training, which is really useful. But I think it needs to be tailored to kind of SCs and what we're looking for in that particular role. So I've certainly had some, but I don't think I've come across many organizations that do it well.
Yeah.
I think there's still room for improvement. Yeah,
and I think the idea of a mentor is a fantastic one, because I think that kind of company-wide interview training can be great, can be not so good. It's a bit so company-wide training is can be great, cannot be so great, but it's not specialized to pre-sales. And then having a mentor really enables. I can just imagine that you would just learn. It would be a lot more effective, effectively.
Oh yeah, 100%. And sometimes it's time, it's the time, it's the cost. So sometimes there are competing factors, but I do look at it and go, it is such a critical hire, and I think more attention needs to be made on it, because if a mistake is made, whether it's just not right for the candidate and the process you've put them through means you've really put them in an environment that they can't succeed because they didn't know enough about it, and vice versa, you didn't know enough about the candidate, then that has a huge impact. You have a huge ramp period. Then you realize, this individual may not be quite right for the organization. That's really bad for them. It's really bad for you. And that has a direct effect on sales. And I've seen it time and time again. So, it's something that I try and strive towards. I'm very fortunate that here at Appzen, I've managed to hire really well so far. And we've got a rock star team. But I don't think there is enough focus on it or emphasis on it for a lot of organizations, or certainly a lot of my peers that I talk to that are in different organizations. They struggle with the same type of problems.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you so much, Andy, for your time and all these insights. I'm going to stop recording so I can hear the question now.
Thanks so much, Andrew. I really appreciate it. It's been great. It's been really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, you're welcome. Apologies for a couple of interruptions there, but